Okay, I'm going to try again. I've got a problem with my internet, which is really weird because I've been on Zoom all morning. So it's suddenly stopped, and I've got a feeling my phone needs the power of the internet. But Alex is asking again. Let's try again, Alexandra. If not, I'll have this afternoon to see if my internet. I've tried to turn it off and back on again, but it's not working. Oh, she
Yay!
is! That's so exciting. I was like, oh God, this is when you need an IT person because my
Oh gosh,
internet has
don't
just
worry
gone
about
down.
it. My phone decided to update last week when I was doing a live, so it just completely cut off.
Oh,
So I
did
just
it?
completely disappeared. Yep, it was fine.
God,
It's
those
fine.
updates are so annoying. I've had that once overnight, which then meant my alarm didn't go off the next
Yeah,
morning. And it's like, imagine if you have a plane to catch or whatever.
I
So I'm now
know.
really scared about doing updates. But Alexandra, thank you so much for agreeing to
Thank you
chat
for having me.
because we've never actually met
Met face to
or
face.
spoken before. But I follow you on Instagram after seeing you and hearing your lovely chat when you were talking to Natalie Clough.
Yes, who's really amazing and does lots of really interesting lives as well, I always think.
Doesn't she? She does really good ones. And I was introduced to her by Liz Earle during the lockdown because she was doing some live Pilates classes, which when I found the time, I did, and I've stopped doing. But that was really fascinating. And I listened to the two of you when I was driving to London one day, and I thought, oh gosh, I'd love to get you on for our listeners to talk to, because for those people that don't know, we are Figures a sustainable fashion brand, and one of the things I've committed to is use our voice to try to spread the word about how to be more sustainable in our own lives. Obviously, trying to do that within our. So I thought live chats of different people who could specialize in different areas would be great. And why don't you? I mean, I'll introduce you quickly because you're just a brilliant food writer and chef, and you do those great podcasts. Come dine with me.
Come for supper, yeah,
Come,
close.
come to dine with me. That's the thing. Come
It's
to
the same
yeah,
thing, just not on TV yet, but yes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But they're brilliant. Of you talking to all these brilliant people, like the guy who founded the was it the Pig or the Hotel Divan?
Yes, he's really interesting. Robin Hudson. He's really
Yeah.
interesting. I think his wife would also be really interesting to talk to. She
Oh,
does all the interiors and stuff there, and she's very good at sourcing funny things, sourcing kind of antiques and vintage things and then mocking them together with maybe something that's like a kind of nouveau
yeah.
mimic of it. She's very clever as well.
Oh, well, we should get her because I think
You
that's it.
should. Yeah.
It's all about, like, I'm just redoing my kitchen, thinking, right, no, it's not about new the whole time, is it? It's about
No. Yeah.
update. Um, so, so yeah, so you're a brilliant chef and food writer, and I know that you're, from listening to your podcast, your chat with Natalie, you're sort of pretty passionate about it as well. And I was very impressed that when we said you want to have something, you said no because I don't want to be accepting gifts. And I thought, well, good on but do so. I suppose what I wanted to sort of chat through was kitchen and food waste, which is what I
Yeah.
heard. And obviously, being a chef, that's the main thing. I mean, and I think it is one of the biggest areas, isn't it? As Ashborough said, food waste is huge now.
Yeah, huge. And I think especially at Christmas, I know that we weren't talking necessarily
No,
about Christmas, but
yeah,
at Christmas time, food waste, I think it goes up by something like 60 something percent. So it goes up a lot because I guess the idea of Christmas is kind of abundance and generosity and like excess. That these are all
yeah,
kind of things that we have. And so when you do that with food, if you're not going to be able to eat it all, I think a lot gets thrown away. And it's not just in the home. I think we see less and less of it now, but big displays at restaurants or that sort of fashion to have buffet, like kind of Sunday lunch buffets and things, and where they have to keep it looking really glorious and kind of like voluptuous in terms of what's there all the time. So if anything's running low, they have to kind of replenish it, and then I guess it just doesn't get eaten. So food waste is a big problem. I am very passionate about, I think we can easily get kind of put off or sort of like overwhelmed by the bigger picture, because I think fundamentally it needs to happen in industry. But I love encouraging people to reduce food waste in the home. And I think actually it can be a really enjoyable thing.
Yes.
And you feel really smug. You feel
Yeah.
kind of satisfied, and the satisfaction, and that you made this from that. I mean, I saw someone make pancakes the other day from banana peel, which is not something I've done,
Oh
but I
my.
was like, wow, that's the step above.
Yes.
But I think some of my favorite things that I tend to kind of say to people, and now they're becoming less kind of taboo in a sense, but trimming vegetables sounds really basic, but we aren't in courgette season, but something I see all the time is when people buy courgettes, you know, you've got the kind of little stem bit on the top, and then even the bottom, and people chop the top and the bottom off. We are so used to trimming vegetables, like we trim the carrot, and I understand if we're all in a restaurant and everything has to be lined up and straight, that's fine, but most of the time we're not. And those bits,
and it's a good bit for you, isn't it?
well, for me, it's the most delicious bit. Like if you roast it, oh, it's just completely delicious. And even if you're doing something grated or raw, so I think we trim less is a really basic thing, but it's worthy. And then things like eating your broccoli stalk, eating the beetroot leaves, pretty much all vegetables you can eat in their entirety. I would say the only thing you can't is rhubarb, but you can't actually eat the leaves, they're poisonous. And you can often buy rhubarb, or if you pick rhubarb, it's got the leaves. But beetroot leaves, carrot tops, again, carrot tops can actually be quite hard.
Beetroot leaves are for salad, or?
Yeah, so I love beetroot leaves actually kind of like sauteed with a little bit of garlic and maybe some chili. Sometimes I tend to kind of like mix leaves together, because you don't actually, even if you buy a whole bunch of beetroot, you're not going to get a load of leaves there. You're going to get some. So maybe mix it with some spinach, or mix it with some kale, or mix it with some cavolo nero. And it's really delicious, beetroot leaves. Carrot tops are a little bit more bitter, but again, things like, on pesto, basil can be really expensive. If you grow it and you've got it all around, it's fine. But if you've got a big family, or even if you've got kind of like 3 children, you're making homemade basil pesto, it can be more expensive to make it yourself, because all the herbs and the nuts and stuff, it's so expensive. Yeah. So I often use rocket, or again, you could use carrot tops, something that's kind of got a bitter, more of like a bitter, sharp taste, works really well. And then even on the nuts, it's not so much a food waste thing, it's maybe more of a cost thing, but things like cashews work really well, or sunflower seeds. It doesn't always have to be pine nuts, so kind of jazzing that up. And actually it makes it more interesting, because rather than being like, oh, this doesn't quite taste like basil, like, oh, this is a completely different thing, and it's very delicious, and we've made it with, you know, the leaves from the carrots. Or, you know, you could do beetroot top pesto, you can do spinach pesto even.
Inventive, isn't it? Not just opening the fridge and thinking, oh, you know, there's nothing that I'm thinking of a main meal, or what I've thought about tonight. It's about what I've got. What can I now make from it? Or what about freezing? I mean, my mother was a massive freezer.
My mother is a massive freezer. She loves
age where things will come out again. But I mean,
I think it is coming back in, you know, but because honestly, my mum will be more attracted to a recipe if you can make it. She's like, these are great because I can make them 3 months in advance, and then I can freeze them and then have them. I'm like, okay, great. But it really is true. I mean, the other night we made prawns, pan fried them. So we had the shells, and I just popped the shells in a saucepan with a bit of fennel, because I had roasted some fennel. So now I have a prawn fennel stock, which I shoved in the freezer. And now it's made me think this week, oh, I might use that stock and I might make a risotto rice, just not even anything else in there, just use that stock to cook the risotto rice and have that on the side of something else. So it's sort of, everything sort of feeds into each other, I think, when you cook that way, and it inspires you to
prawns.
cook.
Was it just this? Sorry, the prawns. Was it just this? The skins, or was it the actual prawn?
Just the shell. So I peeled the prawns. I left the tails on because basically I just pan fried them, and I made a saffron mayo. But I kept it was a Saturday. It's not like that every night, I've got to say. I kept the shells, just popped them in a saucepan, and then I popped it like a bit of fennel, and fennel goes quite nicely with that. And I actually popped some parsley stems in there as well. Herb stems are a good one. Also, a little tip for everybody who likes minted new potatoes, because mint stems, whereas basil stems, coriander stems, even parsley stems, to a certain degree, you can blitz all of that up if you're making a pesto, or you can chop it up. Mint stems are a bit woody and you can't really do that. Same with rosemary, like you don't really want it. It's like eating a twig. But if you boil your potatoes with your mint stems, because you take off all the leaves and then you chop them and have them aside for the end. But when you boil your potatoes, you put those mint stems in there. It will almost give them like more of a kind of permeated mintiness, and then you're using the leaves later. So that's that. I mean, that's a really basic way of kind of just stretching the ingredient, I guess, as far as you can.
Yeah. Well, no, those. I mean, that's also fantastic. I mean, is it all about us changing our mindset? That every ingredient is precious. So when you see the black banana, you don't immediately think, oh, I'll pop that in the bin. It's like, well, actually, what can I now do?
Yeah. But even if you have one black banana, because you're like, oh, well, I don't have enough bananas to make a cake and I'm running out the door and I don't really have time, just put it in the freezer. Put it in the freezer, and then next week you might have another black banana, and then 2 weeks later you'll have 4, and you'll be like, right, it's the weekend and I've got time to make a cake and I've got my bananas and now I can do it. So I think it is.
Banana milkshake. I did one last night. I was a bit hungry before I went to bed. Whisked it up. If you've got kids, that's fantastic for kids, isn't it? What other fruits? I mean, fruits that go off. I mean, I was just thinking, you know, in season. I heard you talk all about with Natalie about in season. So important, isn't it? All about buying local. And at the moment, there's all these apples that people. You know, I'm lucky enough to live in a village, and there's windfall, and people are putting them outside their stores, and store quite a long time. But what other fruit, you know, when fruits go off, is there any other tips, any other fruits that you can do anything with?
I mean, I always roast fruit, and I tend to, like, when there's a big glut of plums in September, and one of my favorite things is to have plum crumble, but plums aren't around all the time. So I kind of forward think. I even have blackberries still in my freezer from in September. But thinking like that, and not everybody can do that. It's like we don't all have time to make jam and make chutney and stuff, but we do have time to put things in the freezer. Strawberries and raspberries can be quite difficult to freeze in their whole self if you want to kind of use them like that. If you're freezing, I freeze strawberries and raspberries, put them in a smoothie, so it doesn't really matter because they're going to be blended. But what I would say is, if you do have lots of berries like that, and often we do, just make a coulis. So just pop them in a saucepan, let them cook down. You could put a bit of sugar if you want, and then if you're being really pedantic, you could run it through a sieve. It also takes up less space. And then you just freeze it. And then, you know, in the week, in the time to come, if you need a quick pudding, you just can do ice cream with the kind of fresh berry coulis, and you can crumble over some amaretti biscuits or something. And it looks so nice. And it is so nice because it is homemade. And you haven't really had to do anything. You've just had to defrost something and buy some ice cream and crumble biscuits over it. Because I guess sometimes that happens.
So clever. It's just about thinking. And what about sell-by days? Because I have so many friends that are so rude about my mother's house and my house.
Sell-by days.
They almost won't eat anything in my house because they think everything's past sell-by date. But I mean, I've never had food poisoning. My mother's never given anyone food poisoning. Yeah. You know what? I know, you know, legally we can't say food by dates don't really matter. But I mean, what do you think about the whole food?
I mean, I think taste and smell is a big thing.
Yeah.
So I think if it looks like with milk, if it smells off, it's probably off. The egg thing where you drop an egg and then if it floats to the top, then it's off. You can do the egg test. I mean, with vegetables and stuff, I just think completely ignore it. There is no way a leek that is telling you it went off 2 days ago and looks completely fine and is still sort of suffocating in plastic is off. Yeah. So I would say in general, ignore sell-by dates. The only thing I've learned is that if there is mold on bread, I always used to just kind of like break it off or just not eat that bit. But apparently normally, it depends how sensitive your stomach is. It means if there's mold on bread specifically, it sort of means that it's kind of all the way through. So it just means it will have more bacteria in it.
Okay.
It's not like cheese. Like cheese, if there's mold, you just cut it off. Or if there's a little bit of mold on top of a jam, which does happen from air, you just take that off. I mean, things like jam and honey honey especially cannot go off because it is basically pure sugar.
And with the bread, so funny enough, I had some bread that was moldy yesterday, and birds, bird table, and birds, again with food. I've got a dog. I'm quite lucky, but you can crumble it all up, and about you can use porridge oats, your leftover fat, roast or whatever it might be. Yeah. You can instead of putting it down, in the bin or down the drain, put it in some oats and again this time of the year do need a bit of extra
Extra feeding.
food. Yeah, so bread can be comforting, can't it?
I mean, another thing I do with bread, because bread normally will go stale before it grows mold. If like sometimes I had it the other day, and because I kept bread in a bread bag, and then I also kept it in plastic, because that will keep it weirdly fresher. I learned that in a bakery. If you want to keep your bread fresh, keep it in its paper bag or whatever you've bought it in, or a canvas bag or tea towel or something. But if you also put it in a plastic bag, it will kind of retain the moisture. And I had made a soda bread, which is very heavy in moisture because it's made with yogurt, and so it's quite a dense, wet bread. And I just left it there too long, and I think I'd left it on the fridge and it had got too hot, so it was just full of mold. But if that hadn't happened, you know, the end of a sourdough or the end of a baguette or something, I tend to sort of try and break those up before they become like rocks, and then dry them out in the oven and then whiz it up, and then you've got breadcrumbs. And you can do kind of nice things, like you can make anchovy breadcrumbs, which is really easy. You just sort of literally pour the anchovies and the oil from a tin into a frying pan and let it kind of mulch around until the anchovies have kind of dissolved. Pop your breadcrumbs in there and then just slowly dry them out in the oven, and then those will last for ages. Like you can just have them on your top. You can kind of pot them on pasta, or you can sprinkle a few on some eggs, or I'm trying to think what else. Anything really. Anything's delicious. But breadcrumbs is a clever one.
Yeah. So yes, so keep an eye on your bread. It's better to not let it go completely stale, then, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's just
really
hard to deal with like that.
Yeah,
kind of like that. Hard.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yes. But maybe you can grate it on a grater.
Yeah, or even you can chuck it into a Magimix. I mean, everybody has all these fancy, high-powered blenders these days, so that, you know, your blender will do a lot for you. Then something else that's quite fun, actually, I haven't yet done it, but I know that you can do it, is if you have double cream, just because we are going into double cream season. Double cream, often once you open it, will only maybe has like 3 or 4 days, and then it will start to be, it's edible, but it will have like more of a tangier taste. If you literally, I would say, put it into a jar, so pour it out of the kind of plasticky containery thing, put it into a jar, and then you just shake it, and you really shake it for quite a long time. What will happen is the kind of fats and the whey will kind of separate, and you'll literally have butter. So you would have made butter, which is quite fun. And all you're doing is shaking it. You just got to shake it. I mean, I would say you're shaking it for about 5 minutes, and then it will just separate. And what's left is butter. And then you can chuck the water away, or you could probably make something with the whey. But I'd stop it there and be pretty happy with myself. It's quite a fun thing to do, to be like, oh, you made butter.
I think that's really fun. I might try that. My mother's fridge is full of off cream.
Cream, yeah, and it's difficult because what are you going to do with off cream? So that's a really fun one to try, I think. And then another tip.
Then eating seasonal, you know, as much as we can. So what should we all be eating now?
So now, I mean, we've got all the kind of like dark leafy greens, so things like, well, cauliflower isn't one, but you know, cavolo nero, kale, cauliflower as well, cabbages, Brussels sprouts. I always say Brussels sprouts are not just for Christmas. Brussels sprouts will be with us until about the end of February. In fact, they kind of only just start to come into season now, and they stretch way beyond Christmas. I love Brussels sprouts. And then fruits. I mean, fruits at the moment, it's really loving your freezer, but you've got things like apples still, especially apples that are stored well. I mean, berry season is sort of over. Quince is just about ending, but soon we'll start having all the citrus like blood orange and things like that. And then interestingly, on the seasonality thing, because obviously we live in England, so things like bananas are never in season here. We don't grow bananas, but bananas are actually a very sustainably kind of sourced and harvested crop, because they come by sea. So they come by ship, bananas. So it's very low impact on the environment. Yeah. So eating a banana has a less environmental impact than eating a tomato that has been grown in England in a greenhouse, which is quite weird, normally because of the compost and the fact that you're using, there's like methane coming from that compost, because it's, you know, it's like animal feces essentially, which is a weird thing to think of. I'm not saying, oh, don't ever eat tomatoes and stuff, but I think we get very kind of caught up in the black and white thing of like, well, it hasn't been grown down the road and it doesn't grow in England, so bananas can never be sustainable and we must never eat bananas. But actually there are certain things, and again, you have to do a lot of research, but Bananas come by ship, so they're fine. Things that I would say to look out for are, and like really bad culprits are, not that I have anything against Peru, but a lot of things that are grown in Peru, so things like asparagus and berries, which if you go to the supermarket now and you look at kind of blueberries and you look at asparagus, most of the time they've come from Peru, and they would have come by air because they have such a short lifespan because they're very kind of soft. Yeah, and the kind of like eco carbon footprint on them isn't great. But more than that, I just don't think they taste very good. I think when you eat asparagus in January, it just tastes like nothing. It just it doesn't taste very nice. And I think there's something really, especially with this year where it's been quite strange and it sort of feels like every day is Groundhog Day. And you're not really sure. We feel like we're moving forward, but we're not really sure, and it's all very strange. For me personally, I think the seasons and clinging onto the seasons has been really useful to kind of keeping me grounded, but feeling like I am progressing and the world is progressing and things are happening and like life is still there in a sense.
Yeah.
It's Lana. So, I think eating with the seasons is a really nice way of doing that, because you do get excited about figs when figs are in season. I was like, figs are in season, it's so exciting. And chestnuts, we're getting chestnuts now, or apples start to taste better than other things.
I think with this year, aside from all the horribleness of what's been going on, I think we've all been so much more in tune with the seasons because everyone's been out. I mean, just around where I live, footpaths are so worn away. Everyone's in London, Clapham Common is there's almost no grass left because
everyone's walking
out, which is really good. And you can't help but notice the seasons when you're outside. And this year especially, it was so beautiful this spring when we first went into lockdown. And I think being aware of the season and trying to listen, we're never going to be able to fully within now in this Western world, that but just being slightly conscious of it most probably is no bad thing. And like you said, looking at things that maybe could come by. I wonder whether sweet potatoes, I imagine, can they be grown in England or they come by ship from the Caribbean?
I think they probably come by ship as well. Things like potatoes, again, they can live for so long. They can survive for so long, so they're often kind of kept in the dark. And there are other strange things like forced rhubarb, which we grow here, but we grow in like dark, sort of covered, enclosed spaces, and that's why it's bright pink. There are incredible things that you can do. I would say the main thing to look out for really is kind of soft fruit. That's a big
Avocados.
Yeah, but again, avocados are now coming. So there was avocados, I think, because of the sheer quantity that we were eating them. And I actually, when the whole avocado thing went a bit mad, it was the same time as quinoa as well. And I think actually my dad was spending quite a lot of time in Peru at the time. And I know that the Peruvians, having grown this grain that was kind of their main source of, I guess, nourishment, now not being able to afford their own crop because the market price of quinoa had kind of tripled in, I think, less than a year, purely because quinoa was trendy. And so we wanted it all. So we bought it all. And again, it's so much more of a bigger problem than just people's personal interests. Like, we listen to what someone says and it's nice and we buy it. So I think thinking about places in England who are growing these things is a really nice thing to do.
Looking at my picture and seeing the bottle in the background, people must be thinking, oh my God. So talk about growing in England. Lovely Izzy, who's interning for us, gave me this on Friday. I said she should have kept it. So it's pen.
Lovely bottle.
Yeah, isn't it? It's Penrose. I'm having problems drinking alcohol at the moment. So non-alcohol. When I say problems, it's giving me really bad headache. So she heard me talk about this, and it's non-alcoholic gin. They're fruit farmers, and they're using the leftover fruit farmers in England, and they're using the leftover raspberries to make gins. And this is so this is raspberries that they wouldn't be able to sell, made into a gin. So, and it's such a lovely bottle. So yes, English fruit farmers, supporting them and farmers is obviously really important. On that subject, just talking about fruit and vegetables, I know Sophie, who is up here listening to us, was suggesting at some stage, I don't know if you've heard about this, some vegetables, if they've got roots, you could put them in water.
Replant them, Like celery. Celery. And also salad. If you ever buy salad, and it's sort of, sometimes it's almost got like a load of earth still attached onto it, where you almost buy a salad like that, you can regrow that as well. It sometimes only has kind of 2 lifespans in it, because again, it's not so much that the salad isn't alive, it's more that the soil isn't alive. So what you need to do if you want to keep that going on and on and on. Same with if you buy a basil plant from a supermarket. It's not that the basil just expires and only grows kind of 3 times. It's more that the soil that you're growing it in is kind of has no nutrients in it anymore. So if you want to keep something like that going on and on and on, just kind of get some compost and then just keep doing it. And if you're really going far, or if you don't live in kind of a small London flat, you could do your own compost. We can get a wormery. You know, that's my dream, is to have my own compost.
I know. No, I'm the same, because I've got a small garden, but it's not big enough to have a compost. And
no, and it, you know, it is like there are smells and stuff you can, but again, I really.
My mother's got one of these. She's moved house recently into you know, downsized, and so she's used to a big vegetable garden and compost. But she's bought this sort of plastic tub thing that contains it, and you put it all in the top, and then there's a thing at the bottom that you open up.
Does it have worms? Do you know
No.
it's a wormery? Because you can get wormeries, which are kind of like a speedier process, because the worms do the stuff.
Yes, well, I know. Well, maybe we need that, because I put my compostable coffee capsules in there. She's getting upset because they're not working quick enough, and the biodegradable compost bags. So great. Is there any other things you can think of that we've missed, that are your 7 hacks, or, you know, that you've talked about before that we?
I mean, a stock bowl is one of my favorite things. I think making stock is very trendy, and we often think it's purely kind of has to be done with animal bones, which it doesn't. But also, I think if you live on your own, or if you live only just 2 of you, maybe you don't have the amount to make a stock. Oh gosh, I do have a name of a compost bin, this mini wormery. But I think, honestly, if you look on Amazon, just answering this question, there are lots on there. But anyway, on the stock thing, something that I will sometimes do is, if I'm just peeling a carrot, or we're having salad, and actually I'm gonna chop some sort of vegetable into it, but not loads, I'll just keep those kind of, instead of popping those into my compost bin or putting them into a bin, I'll just keep them in a bowl, and then I'll just pop them into the fridge somewhere. And then maybe the next day I'll be doing a big roasted vegetable thing, and I'll have like the inside of a pumpkin and something else, and I'll pop that in there. And then the next day I'll have something else I can pop in there, or maybe half an onion, and then I can make a vegetable stock. So I tend to do that once a week, and I don't always use the stuff in the bowl. Sometimes I forget about it, and sometimes it goes, but I think it's quite a good thing to kind of practice, because so
it's a bit like, you know, they were saying the last thing you do is to recycle in everyday life. So the last thing to do is put in the compost. You've got to try to use it before you use
it before it goes in there.
Yeah, so put it in the freezer, put it in, you know, use the scrapings in the you know, like you said, for the stock, or in my case, maybe give the dog some of it.
Exactly, yeah.
Or some people who have Labradors will say you must never give your dog human food because it makes them beg. But mine loves vegetables. She gets the, you know, the ends of the broccoli and all sorts. So,
my dogs love carrots at home. My dogs are obsessed with carrots. They hear you when you peel a carrot. They'll come. They'll be at your feet.
Exactly. If I cut up a carrot, she's across the house. Yeah, she loves a carrot. So someone just asked, what was the gin? It's called Penrose. Is that how I need to pronounce it? The alcoholic Penrose?
Penrose.
Yeah.
Can I repeat that about the vegetable stock? Yes. So I would just say, if you are just 1 or 2 of you, and you feel like you don't have enough vegetable scraps to make a stock, just kind of keep them every day. So, you know, have a little bowl in your fridge, and every time you're kind of prepping something, a carrot, or you're chopping something, just add it in there. And then when you've got about, I guess, a bowl full, if you make a bowl with your hands, you want about that much, just pop that into a saucepan, cover it with water, and then let it simmer. And it doesn't take as long as a kind of bony meat stock, just because the vegetables are much easier to kind of permeate the nutrient into the water. And it's really yummy. And you can make miso soup, or you can just make vegetable soup, or you can add it to kind of a risotto. You can sort of find ways to
gravy. Got the base, because sometimes people add water into gravy, whereas, you know,
exactly, gravy,
vegetable water.
And also, we are in the season, this is the thing, we are in that season where winter food and winter vegetables lend themselves to making stock, because there are bits like the outer bit of a leek, or the kind of furry, leggy, rooty bit, and there are these bits that actually you're not eating, whereas in the summer, most of the stuff you're harvesting, you can almost eat all of it in its entirety. You're eating tomatoes, you're not going to make tomato stock. You just eat the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think in winter we are eating more soups, we're eating more stews, we're eating dals. You know, you can make, I'm really into making kind of like a quick ramen at the moment, or like a vegetable curry, any of these things.
What's a ramen?
Like it's actually kind of like a Korean or noodle soup, basically.
Oh gosh, I'm so bored by cooking. Okay, so this we could talk for hours. I set a time on this, and I get so carried away that we could just go on. But finally, before we finish, we are going to type up some notes, and I think one of the big takes from me on this is just think before the compost. But finally, you mentioned Christmas when we started, and I couldn't agree more. You know, everyone goes and buys 100 mince pies and.
Nope.
Cool. What do you think? Are there any takes for Christmas that we should be thinking about apart from buying less? I know why I think it happens at Christmas. I think it's the same as the lockdown. Everyone panics.
Yeah.
Going to start, and you can't buy. So, do you think it means we have to plan better? We have to write our shopping list better. Or what do you think?
I do think that. I think also at Christmas, because lots of people aren't used to cooking for that many people or cooking that much, you know, especially again this Christmas, people will be home, but the whole family's home again, so suddenly you're kind of like a little bit out of whack. So you're like, well, I must get this, and actually there's buy one get one free, so I'll just get 3 boxes of mince pies, and I'll, you know, that kind of thing. So I think,
so why don't we those people give one to the food banks? Our village shop bank, get the 2 for 1, but put one in the food bank.
And also look online at what the food banks need, because you can always see what your local food bank needs. They'll be like, we need pot noodle, or we need sanitary towels, or we need this, and actually that's something quite nice to do, especially I think because less people are shopping in person at supermarkets, and everybody's trying to avoid going out and about, so they're sort of going online. But yeah, food banks is a really nice idea. And also just being creative, you know, we often get given lots of things.
Yes, exactly. I interrupted you though in the middle of your thing about the 2 for 1 and stuff in the shop, you were saying.
Oh yeah, so I mean, I guess try to avoid the kind of thinking about this extreme excess. I just think we really don't need it all. But I think it's really nice to make food, and when you're making it, you're sort of only going to make what you need. And there are things like at the end of Christmas, you have lots of little bits of raisins and sultanas and things like that, and you don't really know what to do with them, but they do last a really long time. But you can also make more mincemeat with them, I guess. Like really try and use it all up. Otherwise, it sits in a cupboard until next year when you come around to this time again. But then you think that's not really good, so you chuck it away and then you buy more. And that's often where this whole kind of waste thing comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I was looking. I bought some dates yesterday, our village, and I thought, gosh, what can I make apart from put them on my cereal and stuff? Because I'm like you, and I googled, and there was like this, energy bar, like a brownie or whatever, but with dates and stuff, but not the chocolate. But they said put almonds and nuts and raisins. So I guess you could do one of those.
Delicious, yeah. Dates also, like, even dates, I mean, dates, people have dates on a cheese board, that's like a common thing, but I often pop dates into, like, if I'm making something kind of like tomato-y, just a little bit, if you want to add a bit of sweetness, it works quite well with tomatoes. And if it's like a stew or a dal or like an aubergine tomato-y kind of thing, it will just sort of, I guess, dissolve into it, and it will just give it like a lovely sweetness. They're quite good to just add a little hint of it and it's still natural sugar, and it's quite yummy.
Brilliant. Gosh, you really inspired me. I want to.
Well, it was so nice. It was so nice to chat to you.
Any questions for anyone? Making raisins with
That's very fun. Making raisins from grapes. That's very clever.
Good. Yes, well done. So, yeah, that's a good idea. Making raisins of grapes. Yes, that's off grapes. But don't they go moldy first, or you put them in the oven?
You can. I guess if you dry them out slowly, they should be fine.
Yeah. Any other questions from anyone else?
Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Well, Alexandra, thank you so much. We will try to save it, put it up on our Facebook stuff, because I think
perfect
tips, and especially the one about not cutting off the end of the courgette. I love that one.
Yeah. Just don't, like, we will trim and like, wax and pluck ourselves far too much. I feel like we don't need to do it with our vegetables.
Yes, I agree. Well, listen, have a good rest of the day. Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you for having me. I can't wait to watch next week's as well.
Yes, good. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.